Amelia Earhart. Amelia Mary Earhart, born July 24, 1897, disappeared July 2, 1937, declared dead January 5, 1939, was an American aviation pioneer and author. Earhart was the first female aviator to fly solo across the Atlantic Ocean. She set many other records, was one of the first aviators to promote commercial air travel, wrote best-selling books about her flying experiences, and was instrumental in the formation of the 99s, an organization for female pilots. Born and raised in Atchison, Kansas, and later in Des Moines, Iowa, Earhart developed a passion for adventure at a young age, steadily gaining flying experience from her 20s. In 1928, Earhart became the first female passenger to cross the Atlantic by airplane, accompanying pilot Wilma Stultz, for which she achieved celebrity status. In 1932, piloting a Lockheed Vega 5B, Earhart made a non-stop solo transatlantic flight, becoming the first woman to achieve such a feat. She received the United States Distinguished Flying Cross for this accomplishment. In 1935, Earhart became a visiting faculty member at Purdue University as an advisor to aeronautical engineering and a career counselor to female students. She was also a member of the National Woman's Party and an early supporter of the Equal Rights Amendment. Known as one of the most inspirational American figures in aviation from the late 1920s throughout the 1930s, Earhart's legacy is often compared to the early aeronautical career of pioneer aviator Charles Lindbergh, as well as to figures like First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt for their close friendship and lasting impact on the issue of women's causes from that period. During an attempt at becoming the first woman to complete a circumnavigational flight of the globe in 1937 in a Purdue-funded Lockheed Model 10E Electra, Earhart and navigator Fred Noonan disappeared over the central Pacific Ocean near Howland Island. The two were last seen in Lae, New Guinea, on July 2, 1937, on the last land stop before Howland Island and one of their final legs of the flight. She presumably died in the Pacific during the circumnavigation, just 3 weeks prior to her 40th birthday. Nearly 1 year and 6 months after she and Noonan disappeared, Earhart was officially declared dead. Investigations and significant public interest in their disappearance still continue over 80 years later. Decades after her presumed death, Earhart was inducted into the National Aviation Hall of Fame in 1968 and the National Women's Hall of Fame in 1973. She now has several commemorative memorials named in her honor around the United States, including an urban park, an airport, a residence hall, a museum, a research foundation, a bridge, a cargo ship, an earthfill dam, 4 schools, a hotel, a playhouse, a library, multiple roads, and more. She also has a minor planet, planetary corona, and newly discovered lunar crater named after her. She is ranked 9th on Flying's list of the 51 heroes of aviation. Transatlantic flight in 1928. After Charles Lindbergh's solo flight across the Atlantic in 1927, Amy Guest expressed interest in being the first woman to fly, or be flown, across the Atlantic Ocean. After deciding that the trip was too perilous for her to undertake, she offered to sponsor the project, suggesting that they find another girl with the right image. While at work one afternoon in April 1928, Earhart got a phone call from Captain Hilton H. Rayleigh, who asked her, "Would you like to fly the Atlantic?" The project coordinators, including book publisher and publicist George P. Putnam, interviewed Earhart and asked her to accompany pilot Wilma Stultz and co-pilot a mechanic Louis Gordon on the flight, nominally as a passenger, but with the added duty of keeping the flight log. The team departed from Trepassey Harbor, Newfoundland in a Fokker F-VIIB, a 3M, named Friendship, on June 17, 1928, landing at Poole near Bury Port, South Wales, exactly 20 hours and 40 minutes later. There is a commemorative blue plaque at the site. Since most of the flight was on instruments and Earhart had no training for this type of flying, she did not pilot the aircraft. When interviewed after landing, she said, "Stultz did all the flying, had to. I was just baggage, like a sack of potatoes." She added, "Maybe someday I'll try it alone." Earhart reportedly received a rousing welcome on June 19, 1928, when she landed at Woolston in Southampton, England. She flew the Avro Avian 594 Avian 3, SN, R3 AV-101 owned by Lady Mary Heath and later purchased the aircraft, and had it shipped back to the United States, where it was assigned Unlicensed Aircraft Identification Mark 7083. When the Stultz, Gordon, and Earhart flight crew returned to the United States on July 6, they were greeted with a ticker tape parade along the Canyon of Heroes in Manhattan, followed by a reception with President Calvin Coolidge at the White House. Promoting aviation. Celebrity endorsements helped Earhart finance her flying. Accepting a position as associate editor at Cosmopolitan magazine, she turned this forum into an opportunity to campaign for greater public acceptance of aviation, especially focusing on the role of women entering the field. In 1929, Earhart was among the first aviators to promote commercial air travel through the development of a passenger airline service. Along with Charles Lindbergh, she represented Transcontinental Air Transport, TAT, later TWA, alongside Margaret Bartlett Thornton, and invested time and money in setting up the first regional shuttle service between New York and Washington, D.C., the Ludington Airline. She was a vice president of National Airways, which conducted the flying operations of the Boston Maine Airways and several other airlines in the Northeast. By 1940, it had become Northeast Airlines. Transatlantic solo flight in 1932. On the morning of May 20, 1932, 34-year-old Earhart set off from Harbour Grace, Newfoundland, with a copy of the Telegraph Journal, given to her by journalist Stuart Truman to confirm the date of the flight. She intended to fly to Paris in her single-engine Lockheed Vega 5B to emulate Charles Lindbergh's solo flight 5 years earlier. Her technical advisor for the flight was famed Norwegian-American aviator Bernt Balchen, who helped prepare her aircraft. He also played the role of decoy for the press, as he was ostensibly preparing Earhart's Vega for his own Arctic flight. After a flight lasting 14 hours, 56 minutes, during which she contended with strong northerly winds, icy conditions and mechanical problems, Earhart landed in a pasture at Culmore, north of Derry, Northern Ireland. The landing was witnessed by Cecil King and T. Sawyer. When a farmhand asked, "Have you flown far?" Earhart replied, "From America." As the first woman to fly solo nonstop across the Atlantic, Earhart received the Distinguished Flying Cross from Congress, the Cross of Knight of the Legion of Honor from the French government, and the Gold Medal of the National Geographic Society from President Herbert Hoover. As her fame grew, she developed friendships with many people in high offices, most notably First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt. Roosevelt shared many of Earhart's interests and passions, especially women's causes. After flying with Earhart, Roosevelt obtained a student permit, but did not further pursue her plans to learn to fly. The two friends communicated frequently throughout their lives. Another flyer, Jacqueline Cochran, who was said to be Earhart's rival, also became her confidant during this period. World flight in 1937. First attempt. On March 17, 1937, Earhart and her crew flew the first leg from Oakland, California, to Honolulu, Hawaii. In addition to Earhart and Noonan, Harry Manning and Mance, who was acting as Earhart's technical advisor, were on board. Due to lubrication and galling problems with the propeller hub's variable pitch mechanisms, the aircraft needed servicing in Hawaii. Ultimately, the Electra ended up at the United States Navy's Luke Field on Ford Island in Pearl Harbor. The flight resumed 3 days later from Luke Field with Earhart, Noonan and Manning on board. The next destination was Howland Island, a small island in the Pacific. Manning, the only skilled radio operator, had made arrangements to use radio direction finding to home into the island. The flight never left Luke Field. During the takeoff run, there was an uncontrolled ground loop, the forward landing gear collapsed, both propellers hit the ground, the plane skidded on its belly, and a portion of the runway was damaged. S-pause sec equals 0.4 e-pause, the cause 2 of the ground loop is controversial. Some witnesses at Luke Field, including the Associated Press journalist, said they saw a tire blow. Earhart thought either the Electra's right tire had blown or the right landing gear had collapsed. Some sources, including Mance, cited pilot error. With the aircraft severely damaged, the flight was called off and the aircraft was shipped by sea to the Lockheed Burbank facility for repairs. Manning, having taken a leave of absence to do the flight, felt that there had been too many problems and delays. He ended his association with the trip, leaving only Earhart with Noonan, neither of whom were skilled radio operators. Second attempt. While the Electra was being repaired, Earhart and Putnam secured additional funds and prepared for a second attempt. This time flying west to east, the second attempt began with an unpublicized flight from Oakland to Miami, Florida, and after arriving there Earhart publicly announced her plans to circumnavigate the globe. The flight's opposite direction was partly the result of changes in global wind and weather patterns along the planned route since the earlier attempt. On this second flight, Fred Noonan was Earhart's only crew member. The pair departed Miami on June 1 and after numerous stops in South America, Africa, the Indian subcontinent and Southeast Asia, arrived at Lae, New Guinea, on June 29, 1937. At this stage, about 22,000 miles, 35,000 kilometers, of the journey had been completed. The remaining 7,000 miles, 11,000 kilometers, would be over the Pacific. On July 2, 1937, at 10 o'clock in the morning, midnight GMT, Earhart and Noonan took off from Lae Airfield, 06°4359S, 146°5945E, in the heavily loaded Electra. Their intended destination was Howland Island, 0°4824N, 176°3659W, a flat sliver of land 6,500 feet, 2,000 m, long and 1,600 feet, 500 m, wide, 10 feet, 3 m, high and 2,556 miles, 2,221 nmi, 4,113 kilometers, away. The expected flying time was about 20 hours, so, accounting for the 2-hour time zone difference between Lae and Howland, and crossing of the international date line, the aircraft was expected to arrive at Howland the morning of the next day, the 2nd of July. The aircraft departed Lae with about 1,100 gallons of gasoline. Johnson estimated that 900 gallons of fuel would provide 40% more range than required for that leg. Using 900 gallons was 250 gallons less than the Electra's maximum fuel tank capacity. That meant a weight savings of 1,500 pounds, 680 kilograms. So Earhart included Mance as a passenger on that leg. The Oakland to Honolulu leg had Earhart, Noonan, Manning, and Mance on board. The flight from Oakland to Honolulu took 16 hours. The Electra also loaded 900 gallons of fuel for the shorter Honolulu to Howland leg, with only Earhart, Noonan, and Manning on board. But the airplane crashed on takeoff. The crash ended the first world flight attempt. Around 3 p.m. Lae time, Earhart reported her altitude as 10,000 feet, but that they would reduce altitude due to thick clouds. Around 5 p.m., Earhart reported her altitude as 7,000 feet and speed as 150 knots. Their last known position report was near the Nukumanu Islands, about 800 miles, 700 nmi, 1,300 kilometers, into the flight. Speculation on disappearance. There has been considerable speculation on what happened to Earhart and Noonan. Most historians hold to the simple crash and sink theory, but a number of other possibilities have been proposed, including several conspiracy theories. Some have suggested that Earhart and Noonan survived and landed elsewhere, but were either never found or killed, making en route locations like Tarawa unlikely. Proposals have included the uninhabited Garner Island, 400 miles, 640 kilometers, from the vicinity of Howland, the Japanese-controlled Marshall Islands, 870 miles, 1,400 kilometers, at the closest point of Mealy Atoll, and the Japanese-controlled Northern Mariana Islands, 2,700 miles, 4,300 kilometers, from Howland. Earhart was a widely known international celebrity during her lifetime. Her shyly charismatic appeal, independence, persistence, coolness under pressure, courage and goal-oriented career along with the circumstances of her disappearance at a comparatively early age have driven her lasting fame in popular culture. Hundreds of articles and scores of books have been written about her life, which is often cited as a motivational tale, especially for girls. Earhart is generally regarded as a feminist icon. Earhart's accomplishments in aviation inspired a generation of female aviators, including the more than 1,000 women pilots of the Women Air Force Service Pilots, WASP, who ferried military aircraft, towed gliders, flew target practice aircraft, and served as transport pilots during World War II. The home where Earhart was born is now the Amelia Earhart Birthplace Museum, and is maintained by the 99s, an international group of female pilots of whom Earhart was the first elected president. A small section of Earhart's Lockheed Electra starboard engine nacelle recovered in the aftermath of the March 1937 Hawaii crash has been confirmed as authentic S-pause sec equals 0.2 e-pause, and is now regarded as a control piece that will help to authenticate possible future discoveries. The evaluation of the scrap of metal was featured on an episode of History Detectives on Season 7 in 2009. Thanks for watching HerStory channel. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe our channel.